Good morning. Sorry, I didn't turn on my voice before. Good morning. Good morning. Can anybody hear me? Can you guys hear me this morning? Hello. Let me know in the chat box if you can hear me. Can you guys hear me or no? I'm concerned that nobody can hear me. If you can hear me, can you let me know in the chat box, please? Somebody? Good morning. Hello. Can anybody hear me? Okay, perfect. Okay. Thank you. Sorry to harass you guys that we're doing other work. I just had little alert boxes coming up, and so I was very concerned that I was going to have to shut the room down and then have to come back. So good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm here a bit early. It is Wednesday, April 1st. How is everyone doing today? Middle of the week. What are you guys up to? What are you doing? Good morning. I see Andrea. Andrea, I'm super thrilled that you've been able to get into these webinars. I know there was some tech issues. Good morning, Katie from Dovercourt. All the Katies on the chat this week. Okay, so Katie is saying there was a chat box issue, so I don't know if that is an internet issue, because certainly I was just trying to open up YouTube in another window, and it's very, very sticky today for me, but I was hoping that is my end of the internet, but I guess we'll see. Perfect. So Katie logged out, logged back in. So welcome. Okay, Jen had a similar issue with the chat box, so it sounds like the internet is a little bit slow this morning. Hopefully we don't have too many, knock on wood, fingers crossed, we don't have a full hour of problems. Morning, Kristen from Strathmore. I saw you guys might be looking at draining. We had that thread in the Alberta Association of Aquatic Professionals. Mike refreshed and it worked. I'm going to go ahead and pop in the directory link that I created. So if you guys want to start filling it out, 2 jobs and possibly 2 overlapping meetings. That's okay, Katie. It's not, I would never be offended. That's kind of what happens right now. Everybody thinks because in aquatics we're not busy, we have an abundance of time for meetings. And actually it's ironic, Katie Short, I heard from a different Katie here in Alberta that she was bumped from this webinar for a meeting this morning. Good morning, Alexandra Folger. Okay, so chat box issues. Angela's back from Oakland, Maryland. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead, you guys, and give you the link for the directory that I created. So I did have to do it in Google Drive. It's not a Google form. It is a Google Drive document. So if you choose to put your contact information in this, it will be a public link for webinar participants. And so you'll see right in the Google document that I can't, it's not FOIP or FIPA compliant for privacy. It is intended just to network people, but ultimately I can't control who has access to the document. So if you do want to put your name in there for networking with other people in your region, that's entirely up to you. There's no requirement. Just there was some interest in something like that. Good morning, Nick. Nick, where are you from? Angela's here from Oakland. If you're hanging out in the background, you're new to one of these webinars, welcome. If you pop your location in the chat box, we'll give you a short shout out, see who's here, see what's going on. Alexandria, Virginia. I've been to Alexandria. Actually, I've been to DC many times, but I've driven through Alexandria. Coronado, California. Orland Park, Illinois. Jason, whereabouts is that, near Chicago, or what is that close to? My Illinois geography is not great. I have driven through Chicago. I have, what is the name of we went to one of the famous deep dish pizza chains. Mike is here from Meadville, Pennsylvania. Good morning, you guys. One of the things I thought we would do this morning is I'm just going to show you a couple other things. Mitchell, you're back for more from Vacova. Okay, Jason says he's in a southern suburb about 30 minutes outside of Chicago. Stephanie's here from LA, so landed in LA for sure. LAX, not my favorite airport, but thought I'd show you guys a couple other things because today the topic is in service. I just wanted to show you a couple other pieces of equipment, inexpensive, that I like to use for in-service or staff training. And then if you guys want to throw any things like this in the chat box, I thought it would be a great resource for people who join us later for things that they also like to do in in-service, because the topic today is in-service. So one of the first ones I brought these are books. So when I'm doing lifeguard training and scanning, I like to use Where's Waldo, okay? So these are, $9, $10 on Amazon, super easy to grab. And we can do some activities where at first, right? So if we remember Where's Waldo, sorry, we're starting with extensive scanning, right? So the lifeguard might be responsible for extensively scanning the whole page. And then after 30-second timer, they're set up in groups. So I have books for each participant. And so in pairs or in groups, let's say I'm doing my extensive scan for 30 seconds. Then I pass the page over to my partner, and then my partner can ask me probing questions about what I saw. So did you notice the man in purple? Did you notice what is happening on the bigger picture, right? Can they describe that it's a boating scene? Did they only get focused on specific details? So when we're working with our guards, it's a great way to say, well, did you focus only on the customer who came in that you thought was high risk, but then you missed the customers over here? So great money saving idea from Katie Short. So Where's Waldo calendars? So go to the calendar stores in January, pick them up at 50% off. I also know a lot of people, you can find many individual sheets on Google and print them on tabloid size paper, legal size paper. Absolutely, if you have a budget. I know for me, I just purchased these for myself because I teach a lot of lifeguarding classes, and then I teach a lot of lifeguard instructor classes. So I am training the lifeguard instructor candidates in how to do their classes. So Where is Waldo? There's a bundle of these on Amazon right now. I believe it's 5 for $40. So this is a great investment if you have a little bit of money. The other one I wanted to mention to you guys is the I Spy books. So if you're not familiar with I Spy books, these are curated pages and they're crazy. Let me open one up. Okay, so this is I Spy. Sorry. This gives you an idea. There's a lot of colors. There's a lot of things going on. So same idea, right? I could give my guards 30 seconds to memorize the page, and they have no scanning technique at first. And then in the second round or the third round, maybe I give them a scanning technique. So I want you to develop a scanning pattern for this page, or I want you to work to develop a memorizing technique to remember everything on this page. And so you can guide your candidates or your staff through in-service training through a variety of activities with these books or pages, right? So I have I Spy, right? I mentioned the Where's Waldo. So those are great options that I like to have. And again, $50 if you can get a couple of these, or, thrift stores, garage sales, eBay, right? If you're on a budget, these are classic. These are not hard to find. And then I love Katie Short's idea of calendars as well as printable images off of Google. Another thing I wanted to share with you guys that I'm sure you all have in your homes or in your workplaces, go to the dollar store and get some playing cards. Okay, so playing cards are amazing for a lot of different reasons. First of all, they're cheap. You can print them yourself as well online, but think about the ways you can use playing cards. You could use playing cards and get the customers, not the customers, your staff involved. Certainly when you go back to the pool, not so much right now, although there may be an online randomizer for drawing cards. So let's say I'm doing something with my staff and I get them to select a card. And then we decide, what are we doing with this card? I could set it up as maybe it's teams for in-service. Maybe the diamonds are a team, the hearts are a team, the clubs are a team, the spades are a team, right? To randomize my participation. Maybe I'm using the number for something. So maybe this is a warm-up. So Joey's going to pick our warm-up for today, and we're doing 7 burpees on a dry deck or 7 jumping jacks. Or if you want to go hardcore, 7 rounds of CPR, right? Or 7 lengths of the pool, right? What are your options? Then you can also do this in pair activities, right? So if you have a large staff of 50 or 60 and you grab several decks of cards, maybe you get to getting to know you games. So my 5 of hearts, you need to go find another new staff member, and that will be your buddy for in-service today. And it can only be the same number. So there's only 4 cards with the number 5. Or you need to find somebody with the same suit. Perhaps that's hearts, right? So another way that you can use these cards, I've also seen these used as stations. This is a quick way to number stations if you're doing stations around the pool. So we all print off paper and laminated sheets, but why not just grab your deck of cards and then, okay, guys, station 5 is over here. Station 6 is over here. Super, super easy, right? You can get cards for $1 at the dollar store. So that is not even the extent of how you can use playing cards. So if you guys have any ways that you have used playing cards in staff training or in service, can you pop those in the chat now? Because I think it's great to think about what are some ideas, simple things that we can accumulate equipment-wise while we're off work out of our facilities. If you have a small budget to put in an Amazon order to be delivered in the future, cards are super, super great. The last one I wanted to mention for today is bananagrams. Sorry, I clearly need to practice this. Oh, bananagrams. Okay. Bananagrams is a word game. You can pick this up at Amazon. In Canada, I bought this at Walmart. I believe it was $15. Bananagrams is like Scrabble, but it's a little bit different. So yes, you could play bananagrams. You could have it in your office for your guards to play. I'm just looking. So Mike is mentioning you could do a poker swim. So where they earn cards. Awesome. So they would earn perhaps a royal flush or a straight. Each team is trying to win different activities to put together their suit or their flush or their sequence. With the bananagrams, basically bananagrams, you get little tiles, same as Scrabble. The thing I like about the bananagrams is there is about 150 tiles, and these are a durable plastic, like a melamine, and so they're not like your wooden Scrabble tiles, which on the pool deck are gonna like fall apart with the wetness. So bananagrams, you can have it as a game in your office for your staff to play, you know, on breaks. One of the presenters, so Rishona on Monday talked about having kits. So what can your instructors use if you have a fecal contamination in the future when your pool has reopened? Having kits for certain ages or certain lessons that are ready to go on the fly. So this could be there for that kit. Or for a similar reason, Mike mentioned the poker, we can give out different letters to different staff members in terms of earning letters to make words during in-service. Or we can also use it just as a random draw, like in Scrabble. So you come to in-service, you draw a letter. Okay, so today I've drawn the letter N. Maybe I use that for teams. So MNNOP, those letters are going to go together. Or in sequence, you're the whatever letter N is. Let's say it's the 18th letter in the alphabet. You will go 18th when we get to fitness, or you will go 18th when we go to some sort of activity. So lots of different options with the bananagrams. I really, really like them. The actual game itself is very much like Boggle, where you're making words with letters and you're not scoring points. You're just trying to make as many words as possible in a group. So those were 3 things I wanted to share in terms of in-service equipment. If you guys have any simple in-service equipment that you like to use, what I mentioned so far this morning was the playing cards, right? Different ways you can use playing cards. I mentioned the bananagrams, which are, I love these. Like I said, $15, I think, is what I paid in Canada on Walmart. And then my Where's Waldo books. So these are great for me. I enjoy using these. Good morning. I see Ashley and Natalie. They're here for later. And we've got my I Spy books. So I enjoy those as well. So those are some great options. If you've just joined us, good morning, you guys. Pop your location in the chat box. If you haven't been to one of these webinars before, we spend about the first 15, 20 minutes just visiting. I'm chatting about some different in-service equipment that I've purchased on Amazon. Super, super easy, inexpensive. You can also get it from a thrift store. You can get it from, garage sales when social physical distancing ends. Let us know where you're here from. So we have Nevada, College Station, Texas, Massachusetts, Bentonville, Arkansas, Medicine Hat. Good morning, Maxine. Tanis is back. Sean and Maddie from SLO. Adrian from Maple Grove. Good morning, everyone. Very excited to have you here this morning. Tillsonburg, Ontario. Vineland, Virginia. Rockford, Illinois. Houston, Texas. Oh, Michael, I'm going to try. Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. Was that close? Correct, maybe? Bartlett, Plano, Texas. Maple Grove, Minnesota was the one I missed. Greenwich, Connecticut. Boulder, Colorado. Republic of Boulder. Houston. Welcome, everyone. Cleveland. I tried, Michael. I'm sure probably you hear that getting butchered often. Cleveland. We're going to get started in about 10 minutes, so we will start after the hour. We're expecting a large group today, so we're just going to get kind of warmed up. Hello, Chris from St. John's, Perryville, Missouri. So welcome, everyone. If you're new here, I have posted in the chat box, but I didn't pin it, so let me pin it. I'm going to pin the Google document if you want to add your contact information to network with others in your area from this webinar. So as I said earlier, it is not FOIP or FIPA compliant. It is open access document. I couldn't figure out a way to do this more professionally in 2 days. I'm just not super tech savvy, and Google Forms was getting unwieldy. So if you want to make if you would like to make your information available to others, you can pop it in that document. It is an open source document, so please use your judgment if that's something that you're interested in. It's not made for sales. It's not made for solicitation. It's just if you want to connect with other people in your area, especially if there's a name that you've seen on the chat box that you want to connect with. Okay, so I've pinned that document if you're interested. Adrian's saying they just got an old fire hose from their fire department, and going to use it to make a new mannequin for lifeguard class. Awesome. If you can take some photos of that process, Adrian, I think that would be amazing, because I'm not picturing exactly how that would work. When you said that, I initially thought of a cool, maybe a deck spray feature that could be used during open swim. But if you let us know how you do that, I think that would be amazing. Leanne is here from High Level. If you're new here, let us know. Noreen's here from the city of Ottawa. Couple other things I wanted to mention before we get started. We've got about 6 or 7 minutes before we start. I did also just get, you guys won't be able to see this. I did just get a box from Abby's Hope, so I will be doing an unboxing later. If you're not familiar with Abby's Hope is one of my favorite organizations. It's a nonprofit organization from the United States. I will put their information in the chat box. So Abby's Hope it's a nonprofit organization in the United States, was named after Abby, who was a child in 2008, I believe, or 2009. She was eviscerated by a drain at a country club pool. And so her family has founded a charity that is deeply involved with pool operations and advocacy for water safety, drowning prevention. And one of the great thing about Abby's Hope is they make amazing graphics and posters and resources. So Abby's Hope, if you haven't heard about them, I've popped them in the chat box. I'm also going to link to a video about Abby's Hope, the Abigail Taylor story. Let me just grab this. It's on our playlist, our certified pool operator playlist, but I'll throw it in the chat box. If you've never heard of Abby's Hope, definitely look at their Facebook page, their Instagram. They're a huge proponent of drain safety, water safety education. So a couple of other great resources. So question from Nick, does anyone know a company that has affordable adult and infant water mannequins? So definitely options, Nick, if you have the time. I've seen people make them from noodles with bleach bottles, milk jugs. Definitely, if you have any links, anybody in the chat box, they'd like to share affordable mannequins. I know that there's always budget restrictions. If you can afford a better quality mannequin that's more realistic, definitely something to work towards if possible with your facility. So any resources, let's pop those in the chat box. Hello, Maya from Spartanburg. Any questions? We've got New Lenox, Illinois. Natalie's here from Indiana. Hello, Cassandra from Sylvan Lake. Welcome. Hi, Marcy from High River. Good morning. If you're just joining us, pop your name in the chat box. We'll start in a few minutes. Plano, Texas. Otterville, Ontario. Welcome back, Cherie. Spokane, Washington. Port Orchard, Washington. St. Cloud, Minnesota. Hanover, Ontario. Nanaimo, BC. Ingersoll, Ontario. Castlegar, British Columbia. Hello, Paige. Paige is here from Aquatic. So if you haven't heard of Aquatic, Aquatic is a podcast produced by a Canadian in the Greater Toronto area, and she interviews some fabulous different individuals from the aquatics industry. So she's had swim angelfish. I did the most recent podcast episode with Paige. Previously, she's talked to Rick Kaufman from the Drowning Warriors podcast. So Paige has a great podcast. Tanya's here from down the street in Okotoks. So I'm based near Okotoks, Alberta. So Tanya is my neighbor, sort of in spirit. We've got Lisa from Creston. Is that Creston, BC, Lisa? Sackville, New Brunswick. All the provinces are represented. Costa Mesa. I don't think we've had anyone from Hawaii. That's my new goal, Hawaii and Alaska. So if we can reach Hawaii and Alaska, I will feel complete. Saskatoon, Joey's here from Arizona. Welcome, everyone. Golden, Colorado. Coors Beer is based in Golden, Colorado. Been there. Tallahassee, Florida. Baylor University. Lombard, Illinois. Red Deer. Good morning, Red Deer. St. Paul, Minnesota. Houston. Lots of people from Texas this morning. Caitlin from Denver. So I've spent a lot of time in Colorado. My in-laws live in Thornton, so I've been all over Colorado. Kansas, Washington, D.C., Colorado Springs. The National Swimming Pool Foundation head office is in the Springs. Sparwood, Michigan, Maryland, Arvada's back. So you guys know, if you were looking for the show notes for Monday, I do apologize. I'm having some issues with the video. The video does exist. It has been downloaded. YouTube has been a little sticky with the trims when I'm trying to cut out. We had some lags with Rishona and the video broadcasting. So please know I am working on it. I will pop the link in the chat box, but it is not complete. So you will see that it's missing the video. So just be patient with me. I am working on that. I appreciate your patience while I do that. Joey is here from Lifeguard Authority. So if you're not familiar with Joey and Lifeguard Authority, there is a great Facebook group online, as well as Joey is passionate about making lifeguarding as a trade, as a profession, being taken more seriously in our age of, staffing shortages, and where lifeguarding is not necessarily as desirable as it used to be, right? Jasper is here, Winter Park, Colorado. So I've got yes, I did. So I put the show notes for Monday in. I'm going to put the link for today's show notes as well. I will pin that. We'll be starting shortly, and then I will authorize the mic and video for Ashley and Natalie. St. Pete's Beach. Sorry, I realized Ashley and Natalie, I didn't do that. So sorry about that. This is webinar number 5. You'd think I'd be an old hand by now, but there's still things I forget to do. So I'm going to pin this. This link I have just pinned will be our show notes for today. It does not have everything yet. It does not have the webinar yet. We're going to be recording. Good morning, Natalie. We've got Gretna's back from Toronto. Oh, we have Santa Barbara, California. Charleston, South Carolina. Love Charleston. My husband loves Charleston. Ben is back. So Ben Zimmerman from Toronto. He'll be presenting in a couple weeks. Evan from Arlington. We've got the Schwa here. Corey from Oshawa, Maryland. Welcome, everyone. It's going to be a big group today, so please give us a shout out where you're located. Hello, Ashley. Vineland, New Jersey. I've pinned the show notes for today, so that's going to be your resource for everything that we... Don't say the Schwa, I apologize. I had an employee for many, many years from Oshawa, and she always said the Schwa, so I had no idea that was derogatory. I do apologize. Joey from Phoenix, lots of representation from Phoenix. Craig, Pennsylvania, Kansas, Morris Township, New Jersey, Fort Eustis, Virginia. Awesome. We've got a huge group this morning. Just going to quickly check. If you've had any tech issues with the chat box, make sure that you can log out and log back in briefly, or you can call in. If you are having any other tech issues, you can send me an email. Hello, Renee from Calgary. My email I'll pop in the chat box, and then once Natalie and Ashley get started, I will check my email to make sure everybody got on who needed to get on. There are also call-in notes from your email. So when you register for any of these webinars, if you're unable to attend in person, you don't need to cancel your registration with me. You just don't show up, that's fine. But we do have phone-in numbers. So if you're not at your desk or your internet is slow, there are call-in numbers specific to Canada or the United States where you're located that you can call in and hear the audio. Okay? So I think we'll get started. I'm expecting a lot of people today, but I want to respect your time. So I'll do a brief introduction, and then I will pass it over to Natalie and Ashley. So thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. It is Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. So we are recording these webinars during the COVID crisis, and the goal is to bring different people in the industry together and provide resources that you can use in live time to help you with your planning, your workload, and your flow in anticipation of getting back in your facilities whenever that is, or for the summer. So I want to introduce this morning, we've got Natalie and Ashley, or excuse me, Natalie and Ashley. I'm just going to pull up my blurbs. So Natalie Livingston is a 24-year veteran of the aquatics industry. She's co-founder of Alive Solutions, which many of you know on Facebook as Aquatics Tribe. Natalie has been recognized with numerous safety awards, including Decade of Aquatic Excellence from Ellis and Associates, Board of Directors and Swim Awards from the World Water Park Association, and most recently, the Aquatics International magazine in their 2020 Power issue. She's joining us today from California. And then we have Ashley, who is a 14-year veteran of the aquatics industry, also a co-founder of Alive Solutions, known as Aquatics Tribe. She has a master's degree in crisis and trauma counseling and is a practicing intern clinician at a private practice. Ashley is people-driven and holistically, focused on wellness at all levels. She's a vice chair on the World Water Park Education Committee and a member of the National Society of Leadership and Success. Ashley is passionate about supporting people and wellness in aquatic operations and the first responder worlds. So please give a welcome to Natalie and Ashley, who are going to be talking about in-service long-term planning.
Hello, can you hear me? Just wanted to check our mic is good.
Yep.
Let's make sure if you can hear Natalie, blonde hair, and then Ashley with the glasses. Make sure you guys can hear them. Can everybody hear them?
Thumbs up. Good. I'm getting lots of guesses. Good. Well, thank you for introducing us, Katie. I first want to acknowledge you for doing this because I know how much work this is, Katie, to coordinate this, to do all this. This is like a labor of love for you. And I know other people have been acknowledging you too, but I just want to say thank you before we even start. So thank you, Katie.
Oh, well, thank you for agreeing. I think that's the biggest thing is, yes, it's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong, but I so appreciate that your willingness to provide your time and resources, because everybody right now in aquatics is stretched for time in some way, whether it's their job, their families. So thank you.
Absolutely. And we're excited to be here today. She introduced us, but our kind of goals we want to cover are to really start with in-service perspective, and that's important when we're thinking about long-term in-service planning. We want to talk about critical in-service evaluation factors, really what we think you should be thinking about as best practices there. And then we're going to cover 11 common mistakes, and we're going to give you some solutions to those that we see to hopefully increase impact and our effectiveness as we go along. So we're going to start with the scenario, and this is kind of stepping back for perspective. So put yourself in this scenario. In July 6, 2018, so almost 2 years ago, there was an event at your facility which resulted in a claim that turned into a formal lawsuit, and depositions are scheduled today. So you think the time frame that we're out 2 years later, I don't know if you could remember what you were doing July 6, 2018, but that's where we're going to start. So Ash is going to start with questions that are specific to the lifeguard that they might ask. And we're focusing specifically on in-service related because that's our topic for today.
Absolutely. And you're talking about, like Natalie said, this is July 6, 2018. So almost 2 years ago, right? So some of these potential questions that will be asked is, when was your last in-service prior to July 6, 2018? What did you do at in-service? What would a typical in-service look like? Do you think your in-service training prepared you for responding to the event appropriately? Did you receive any personal feedback during in-service? Is there anything you would have wanted to spend more time on at in-service? And if you had to rate your in-service instructors, what grade would you give them and why? And again, this is at the lifeguard level.
Right. And I think Ashley and I, jumping from operators to the consulting side, 4-ish years ago and diving into accident and drowning investigations, we were kind of shocked at the approach that was taken to in-service. And I think that's kind of our goal is to, I would have operated differently if I know the things now that I knew, that I didn't know then. So if you frame it in this way, like these are the questions that my lifeguards may be asked, it gives you a different perspective on how to even start or where to start, right? And the next thing being, what kind of questions at a higher, aquatics director level could be asked. So what did you do at the 3 in-services prior to the event? They could go back even farther than that. Who ran in-services? How were they trained? How and why did you choose what to focus on during in-services? Why did you choose to do that specific XYZ topic? Lifeguard specific, whoever it was, did not attend in-service on whatever date. Do you think this impacted their performance during the event? Why or why not? Your lifeguard said they had a little trouble with the real AED and mentioned their practice AED looks different. And in all the in-services, they never personally used the device. Is that possible? Based on the performance at the real event, do you think your in-service training was effective? So thinking about these questions, just kind of mindset-wise, we really learned that in-service is the most likely the closest training that they're going to have to an event. And it is criticized, picked apart, investigated super intently. And to me as an operator, I was just like, it's in service. Like, that's what we do. It's the next thing. We do it every month and I kind of just continue to my routine. But man, if I started with these questions, I would have approached it differently. So we kind of want to use that as a framework for our starting point.
Absolutely. So when we talk about reverse engineering, we're talking about looking at it through the lens of the macro, meaning big picture, right? And then kind of narrowing down how do we create the best big picture with the micro, the each individual in-service to get the macro that we want and the outcome that we want. So this is kind of where we're starting. So what do you want your lifeguards to feel at in-service? And what we mean by that is, what's the intent behind it? Are they motivated? Do they buy into what the purpose of in-service is? Or is it just something that you tell them that they have to do because that's kind of the approach and the culture that we have with in-service in general? What do you want them to know and experience? What do you want them to remember in 2 years? Think about this. I mean, I don't know what I did yesterday, right? So thinking about, talking about, and getting them to remember what happened a year and a half ago, we need to make sure that this is impactful and intentional and that they buy into what we're doing. How do you want them to describe their in-service post-event? This is so critical. And it's just something that I, like Natalie said, never thought about as an operator through the lens of if we go through, have an event and have litigation behind it.
Right. So we're going to start with 11 challenges. The first challenge is in-service is treated like a meeting. And we see this so often that we spend the first 30 minutes discussing things that are current to our facility or, recapping important topics. And I think we really need to find alternative ways to communicate those baseline reminders. I mean, it's one thing if you have something safety and it's important, but 30 minutes or half of your in-service is not what it should be. Like that focus on what do we want the lifeguards to remember? Would they describe it as, well, I sat there and they just kind of talked at me and, we updated on the daily schedule or groups or whatever was going on? We want to kind of stay away from that. So keep reminders at in-service short, and we want to really focus on high quality, hands-on practice, that they're actually involved in doing things. And this isn't just a, like boardroom kind of meeting. So challenge number 1.
And challenge number 2, in-service is a duplication of a lifeguard course. Sometimes we kind of get caught up in that. In-service training should be site-specific and focus on application of skills and in different environments and situations according to your facility. And also making sure that we're spending a lot of time on what actually happens. So often we would hear, well, we worked on spinals. And I'm not saying they're not important, but the odds of a spinal event versus a cardiac event versus a drowning event, we need to be able to apply the proper amount of time and practice into what we actually are going to deal with. That doesn't mean that we should ignore anything, but we also need to really hone in on what's the percentage of realism in it. And it should be the next level from a lifeguard course. So the lifeguard course to make sure we have our basic skills, and in-service is to really fine tune those skills and be able to handle things that come our way in our facilities.
Great. Challenge number 3 is weak documentation. You may have had that panic moment of like, what did you do yesterday? What did you do 2 years ago? And that's really why documentation is so important, because that's really what you're going to rely on. Do you remember what your July 2018 in-service is? Probably not. And the lifeguard isn't going to remember either, but there will probably be shown the documentation that you created to refresh their memory. And then they'll be asked questions based on that. So it should be really well documented, outlines, lesson plans, detailed notes of what you specifically did, signed records of attendance, that they actually signed, not that you were checking off a list. Really things that we are looking for. Remember, it's not just we're documenting there, we're documenting, for years on out, that we can look back at that paper and be very refreshed at what happened, why we did it, who was there, everything that was involved. So consider that in your documentation.
Good. Challenge number 4, allowing excused absences. I can't tell you how many times there was an event and the lifeguard that was involved was asked, when was your last in-service? Well, turns out they didn't attend the last in-service because they had a prior commitment or they were at a funeral. And the one before that, they missed that one too. And there was no scheduled makeup and there was no real clear-cut explanation of how they made up this in-service. So in-service training should be mandatory. It's not optional. Makeup in-service systems are important for that reason, so that when things happen and things come up in life, and to attend every single in-service might not be possible for everybody, especially if we've been in this for a long time, right? So we need to make sure that we are definitely having a makeup in-service plan, but also what we do between those times, right? So if a lifeguard missed in-service, do you have a plan before you put them up in the guard stand to cover the skills that were missed? So often, you can do a quick CPR check or something to that effect to say, yes, we checked these skills and they're still up to par, and we allowed them on stand, and this is the date they're going to make it up, and making sure that we document all of that thoroughly.
Yep, super important. Challenge number 5, not enough hours for in-service. So you need to know your codes. First, you need to know lifeguard agency requirements, best practices in the industry. Are you doing minimum suggested, or are you doing more? And code's that minimum standard. And the thing is, when you get to the other side, if you have an event, it's all about framing, right? They're going to try to paint your operation as incompetent and use any hole that they can get, which is kind of the angle we're taking here with in-service to kind of highlight those angles. But what can we do to make this super solid? We did everything it was required. We went above and beyond. And then the second part of the time is, even if you are doing effective time or over the required hours, is it being utilized efficiently? right? Are we just, swimming laps endlessly? Are we doing the talking like we're talking about? So evaluating the time stance of your operation and where it is being utilized is super important, and looking for opportunities of how you can incorporate in-service into your operation, even without adding additional labor hours in. So consider that for your hours.
Absolutely. And I see some questions about that in the chat box, and we'll get to that after we finish this presentation. Challenge number 6, not identifying and attacking weaknesses. In-service is not just about repeat performance, but about growing and improving. So like we kind of talked about earlier, this is where we refine our skills. And we're only as strong as our weakest link. So if we have identified some weaknesses in our skills or in our facility, we need to make sure that we are taking those on and trying to improve them, not avoid them. And so often some people think that if we admit where our weaknesses are, then that's admitting that we're negligent, and that's not true at all. It's actually the opposite, right? So as a business, we're not supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to be prudent and responsible. So a part of this is making sure that we have systems in place to really identify and attack these weaknesses, and making sure that, everybody's like practice, and practice makes perfect, but it's more of deliberate practice makes perfect, right? Perfect practice makes perfect. It's about making sure that they're actually doing the skills correctly and then repeating that.
Yep. And kind of tag teaming on that same idea, we have this idea of mechanics, what if we're doing things right consistently, if we can do them consistent, and then intensity. Can we do them at an intense level, at a higher level, whether that be physically or environmental intensity. And a lot of people get this out of order. They'll jump from straight to intensity without refining mechanics and consistency. So our recommendation is to focus on, are we doing the right things first? We need to do the right things, the mechanics first, and then we need to jump to consistency and then performance at higher levels. And, in that order. And so we just don't want to see people jumping to intensity, but they are losing the mechanics or not doing the effective stuff on the front end.
Right. And for example, we see that all the time, even when we do audits and stuff like that, is that the guards get so focused on counting and being loud and communicating, but someone's hands aren't even on the chest and they're like 1, 2, 3, but nobody's actually doing any sort of compressions, or they're breathing, but nobody's got a seal or anything like that. So we want to focus on effective care first. And then, like Natalie said, add the intensity in. So awesome. Challenge number 8 is lacking realism. So evaluate realism in all areas, including equipment. Does it, like Natalie mentioned before, one of the questions that will be asked is, hey, it looks like you have a specific AED that's your real AED that you use in emergency, but your trainers don't match, or they've never seen the real one, or they've never touched it. They've never touched the oxygen equipment. They didn't know how to turn it on. They didn't know how to use the equipment, right? How the patients present. So often we see a lack of realism in that, and even on deck stuff or even in the water, patients present differently. Nobody goes to school and learns how to drown. When you go unconscious, it is possible. We've seen so many of drownings occur, and the person's face up underwater or at the surface. And a lifeguard, if I say, hey, go be unconscious, what's the first thing they do? Right? They go face down and do a dead man's float. So often we see lifeguards that really hesitate to respond to an event because they've never seen it before in training. So we need to do the research as instructors on the back end and learn how different people present in all the different situations that occur, so that they understand that they should be responding to all of that stuff appropriately.
Good. Challenge number 9, lacking leadership in service. And this is so easy to get sucked into as an operator, because we use our leads or supervisors to run in service, right? They help with the stations, they do all that. But then think we have an event, and post-event they're asked about their contribution to leadership, and it's, I ran a station, right? Well, did they actually get hands-on practice? Did they actually contribute and get to practice their skills? So something to consider is looking for those opportunities to train leadership, and making sure that they are improving along with everybody else.
Right, and that their skills are great too, because so often in an event, they're the ones that are going to be responding, right? And if they can't say that they practice all their skills as much as their lifeguards, we're in big trouble. Right. So challenge number 10, in-service isn't a priority. Listen, I was an operator for 12 years. It was a huge pain in the rear. I had a couple hundred lifeguards, and I had a responsibility not just about aquatics. I had a lot of other different responsibilities. So for me personally, in-service wasn't exactly wah! It was more of, okay, well, I'm going to pick somebody in my in my company and make it their priority, and they're super excited about it. Give it to somebody who's going to be excited about this, make it a priority, and has the time to really put this thought into it, obviously with some oversight.
Yep. And challenge number 11, in-service isn't fun. We talked about the big picture of, I think in-service is a window to your culture, like I put there, and it really says a lot about your operation, and it can be dynamic, challenging. They look forward to it. They're asking what they get to practice on, at the next in-service. It's something they're excited about. They're looking forward to, and it's one of the highlights. And we want it to be that way. So 2 years later, like our scenario post-event, they're like, oh yeah, in-service was great. We did this. This is, how it brought my skills and more confidence up. So making sure that it's fun and dynamic, obviously with a purpose. Sometimes there's team building activities, but I love to combine the two as well. So that's kind of the 11th challenge, is to make sure that it is that, exciting part of your culture. So the last questions that we kind of want to pose is, in our rush to return to normal, use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to, right? So easy, especially when everything, is going to, either stagger, open up, or we don't know how it's going to open up. It's so easy just to go back into our old habits and our own routines, but taking time right now when we have the time to kind of establish those boundaries and what we want it to look like, and, use it to invigorate what we are currently doing, I think is a great use of this time. And efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right things. And, I can honestly say that from an operator. Sometimes I was just in that, like, just do it. It needs to be done. It's one of those things that has to be on the plate. But when you switch into that effectiveness, like, is what I'm doing being effective? Is it going to contribute to a positive outcome? Is it going to, help us in that end? I think that's a different framework.
Absolutely. Well, and right now, we could see this time of this interesting thing that's going on globally as an obstacle or an opportunity. And so, like Natalie said, any time that we have literal time on our hands, is how can we adapt and overcome? How can we use this to our advantage as operators to not go back to the things we didn't like, and improve and add things in that will actually make our lives and jobs easier and make things better holistically for our department. So, life is lived in plan B, and, you got to roll with that, and a little bit of being organized and some guided mindedness, being mindful of how you're going to do this is going to help significantly. So.
Yep. We kind of had a B theme here. Be strong or be smart was my in-service motto for a really long time. And so I just kind of roll with that for when Katie gave us this topic to talk about. But we did create specific training activities for you to download: a worker bee relay, bee vision activity, an EAB instead of EAP scenario, and reviewing bee stings. So you can download that for free at that website there. I'm sure Katie will pin it to the top so you can access that, or put it in the chat box. But alive-solutions.com/hive-challenge. And you just enter your email address, and it'll pop up the link for you to download that. And you can save it for when you return back into in-person in-services. And we also have an in-service leader course if this interests you. We tried to give you as much content as we could here, and we'll answer a bunch of questions and stay for as long as we need to. But we're going to give one of those courses away to someone who downloads the Hive Challenge activities. So hopefully that is helpful. I know she pinned it there. And if you are interested in connecting with us, we're Aquatics Tribe on Facebook. That's kind of our website. We have lots of online academies, and I already said the in-service training, but we're also doing free crisis connection training. I know Katie mentioned, but Ashley has her degree in counseling, and her emphasis is in crisis and trauma. So we're really trying to make that useful to everybody during this time. So those are on Thursdays. You can sign up right now and watch last week's training, and then tomorrow's will be posted for the next one. So hopefully that adds value. We're trying to do tactical, practical things that you should be doing right now and focusing on in moving forward during this kind of uncertain time. So we're here, Katie. If people have questions, they put them in the chat box, or if you want to kind of moderate that as well, we're happy to help.
First question that I'm getting in the chat box. So the webinar recording will show the PowerPoint slides that Natalie and Ashley have just presented. So I know there was a lot of concern of just so much information. I want to go back and marinate on it. You will be able to see it in the live webinar recording. Any webinar that you look at has the full PowerPoint slide that you can see currently. It's just not available as a download. Okay, so don't freak out. You will have access to this. Thank you to Natalie and Ashley. They spend so much time creating these resources, so it's absolutely fair that they can't give you the whole PowerPoint. If you love what they do, support what they do. They are a business. They have an amazing in-service leader course. I know it was it's hours of work, right? So if you love what you see, support them by purchasing that and taking the time to review it. It's not just a COVID thing, it's an ongoing course that you can take. So whether you start it now, come back to it in 8 months, okay? I want to start first, ladies, with one of the first questions that came up from Joey Rusnak, Lifeguard Authority, Mississauga. So what would you say in your experience is a minimum number of hours per month that would be appropriate to show that, you know, a facility is actively training staff, looking at their competency? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you need to establish what industry standard of care is, and there's kind of two different ways to look at this. You know, I think the plaintiff side and the defense side, right? And you as an operator need to decide where you're going to fall on that. You know, a good plaintiff expert is going to say it's a minimum 4 hours, right? Because that is, you know, written in ARC textbooks, the American Red Cross textbook, it's Ellis standard, it's Stargard standard. You know, but really industry best practice and standard of care is established by what like or similar operations are doing around you. So not necessarily, you know, in Canada, I know YMCA doesn't have a specific requirement, you know, that they outline for, you know, a code. Model Aquatic Health Code doesn't say a specific hours, although they do reference the Texas code, but they kind of leave it up for interpretation. So on the plaintiff side, if they are, you know, post-event, they're going to want to see that 4 hours minimum is met. On the defense side, they're going to try to be creative if you didn't meet that requirement and bring up like or similar operations to say that that wasn't quite the standard of care in your facility or during with your lifeguard agency. Would we love to see everybody 4 hours or more? Absolutely. Is it always reasonable, you know, and appropriate? Maybe not, but that's something for your operation that I think you're going to have to kind of weigh. But that's definitely something to consider of the different angles that they will take and how they will, you know, try to argue the standard both sides if it's not clear cut in a code specifically written for you. Hopefully that helps.
You said, you know, the YMCA's got 2 hours, but you know, if you're in the state of Texas, it's the state code that it's 4 hours. So you're going to take the stricter code under that. And that's kind of where the argument's going to happen in a courtroom. So just be aware of your state codes as well, even if your agency has a different requirement.
Right. Margie, 4 hours per month. I know, you know, in certain operations too, I know like City of Phoenix, they do, you know, I think 8 hours a month. And so if you're an operation around them, like that is what standard of care is going to be, you know, compared against. So, you know, it starts with your local codes, it goes to your lifeguard agency, and then it's like or similar operations around you. So you got to be aware of all of those and kind of make a good decision. Obviously, there is, you know, to be on the safer side, the more you want to do. In our in-service course, if you have time, we cover like 10 or 11 ways to add in-service hours without increasing labor, because that's the biggest issue, right? Is I don't have a budget to go to 8 hours, but there's creative ways that you can incorporate it into your, you know, already existing operation and how to document and track it based on that. Is there another one? Sorry, I'm trying to read them. What are your thoughts on frequency, minimum weekly, monthly, quarterly? You know, it depends on what your operation is at. You know, high summer season operation, people typically run them weekly. Some of them run them monthly or every other week. So it's just establishing a specific pattern and making sure you're sticking to it. We recommend quarterly for you know, non-lifeguard, you know, maybe your EMS security, your front desk admissions to be involved quarterly in that type of in-service. So hopefully that helps. Joey? Ideas for makeup training. So makeup trainings, we want to make sure we have a system in place. Ashley touched on this, but before they go on stand, if they missed in-service on Sunday and they're scheduled Monday for a shift, ideally we want to do something in between the time before they get on stand, because Murphy's Law happens. That is going to be the time when an event happens or something happens, and then they miss the in-service and we didn't make it up, yada, yada. So a really simple way to do that is to create a system where once they miss an in-service, before their next shift, they are at least skill checked. So a CPR evaluation, so we know at least their skill level is maintained. We document that and then schedule them for a makeup in-service. And the makeup in-service, I mean, as much as you can, we'd like to cover the same topic that you did at real in-service, so they're not missing something. So you're being consistent with that if it's possible. At least cover the topic, maybe not in the same way, but at least they're hitting on that.
Right. And I see here somebody said something about realism. I know Kelly Martinez will be doing something about this, but sometimes it's super simple. Like if you lay face down in a cardiac event on deck, if a lot of people like pass out or they're in a chair and they kind of fall in a funky position. Anybody who's in EMS will tell you that people, have a medical event and they end up in the most awkward positions. And so sometimes lifeguards don't even know how to roll someone over to then do the primary check and start care, right? Other things too, I know Kelly's going to talk about, foam and vomit and all of that, but also teaching your lifeguards, what is that indicating that your patient needs, right? So if pulmonary surfactant is present, then obviously they need air, but that's obvious to us, but maybe not the lifeguard. So paying attention to what is these factors telling me. So for example, vomit, if you're providing CPR and someone's vomiting profusely, usually that's telling you that you don't have an effective airway and the air's going into the stomach and now they're vomiting, right? So paying attention to what is, the realism and what is happening telling you about what this patient needs. And I know Kelly will cover a lot more of that later.
Yeah, another thing is airway management. I know we see so often on the, we talk about this in one of our courses online is, we line everybody up sequentially in CPR and everybody's glorious on deck with their heads facing the sky. And in reality, that's not, someone unconscious is going to have a slumped head. And when we were actually out and, we're doing audits and, I give it props to Ashley. She's a great victim. And her head slumped to the side, and every single time they let go, her head slumps to the side again. They really struggle. Lifeguards will be like, you pin her head between their knees. They don't know how to handle it. And it's a different airway management skill to turn somebody's head and to get the airway open than it is to just have someone looking up at the sunshine and do it that way. So making those things as realistic as possible, I think the more, the better.
Yep. Joey, you asked about what scenarios, if any, you advocate removing a team member from deck should they not be able to perform during training. The biggest thing is obviously practice and go. If you're a lifeguard instructor, they kind of teach you about that. And usually you have some sort of guidance from your lifeguard agency on how to do that and your instructor trainers. But the biggest thing for me was always, listen, if it was my kid or somebody, my niece or nephew, would I be cool with putting them on stand to then perform, surveillance and CPR skills? So, I mean, that's really kind of a judgment call. I don't really know exactly, Natalie, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I didn't even see the question, so I don't want to add something that might be way off base.
No worries.
Scrolling.
Answer your question, Joey. What do you recommend staying connected to lifeguards now when you're not able to interact with them at work? Natalie, that's a perfect question for you.
Yeah, I just posted an article on our Facebook page. You can search for virtual ideas. I think Katie even shared it. But there's so many things you could do right now where there's challenges, giving them a CPR scenario and having them do it on someone in their house, or a first aid emergency and having them create a video and submit it to a Google Drive and sharing all the videos, or, create a surveillance section with your bathtub, right? And hit all the keys and components, and, they'll create fun activities that you may even be able to do at a larger scale once you get back to the pool. But check out the article, because there's, a bunch of textbook trivia ideas and things in there that you can do remotely and just kind of keep them engaged.
Yep. And I know a lot of people ask, what are you doing for lifeguards that can't get certified or recertified because everything's canceled or delayed? That's a big question that's going on. The biggest thing too is to check with your lifeguard provider, because a lot of them are coming out with different ideas and suggestions on how to do that, and delaying or just helping out and assisting with that question specifically. But again, talking about time on task, what can you do from a video perspective, or not, from using the internet and whatever, that can really maximize your in-person time. And then going from there, obviously based upon what's going on in your country and standards from your CDC and local health officials.
Yeah, Jacob asked, is there a specific skill or topic that is consistently weak when it comes to the deposition piece for lifeguards or lifeguard supervisors? I would say it relates to care of the event, right? They're going to be very specific to what happened. So if there was, like in this scenario, we gave you an issue with the AED, right? There was a little bit delay with the AED, and we've actually seen a lot of this in real life with the AED happen, where, the lifeguard didn't even realize it was a sticker, right? Or didn't even realize, they needed to take their gloves off in order to touch the pad, because if you have gloves on and you try to open those pads, like, they're going to stick to your gloves. So things in realism like that show up in real scenarios, and they're going to tie that back to training. So if they had an AED issue, they're going to ask questions on, well, when was the last time you personally touched an AED, right? And if we can't give a good quality answer, that's where we're going to get in trouble. So, or not trouble so much, but look less than competent. And that's what they're trying to do. Post-event on the plaintiff side would make your operation look less than competent. So our goal, I think, on the front end, before anything happened, is to, kind of cross all of our T's and dot all of our I's, and make sure that, all of those things are consistent. We're giving feedback, we're rotating equipment, we're doing all the things that would set them up for success.
Yep, I see a lot of questions about ideas for makeup trainings. Now, some people get like, I know when I first started, our makeup trainings were awful. Like, it was all conditioning for 4 hours to kind of as a punishment. But again, think about in the macro sense, 2 years from now, did you attend to makeup? Yes. Well, what did you do? Well, we conditioned because it was more of a punishment. Isn't really going to, bring to light that we worked on skills. So they need to be making up whatever they missed in that specific in-service, the skills that you covered and stuff like that. So just something to think about is that it doesn't need to be super complicated. It's more of having a plan to literally make up the skills they missed. As far as how you do it, we did it, on Saturday mornings. Like, you can have a consistent plan of how to do that. Natalie, I don't know if you have any more suggestions on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not easy. That's the thing. Like, it stinks. That's why I really want you to attend normal in-service. It creates additional work for people. On my end, I created a system and a specific person in my operation. That was their jurisdiction. So they tracked everybody who didn't attend in-service. They put them on a whiteboard with their scheduled next shift date. And the supervisor of the morning would make sure everybody who was open that missed was on that list, was skill checked, that was documented, and then they were scheduled for makeup in service. So yeah, it's a process. It's like, but what's the other option? We can't just like let them miss, right? So just creating that system and procedure and getting somebody accountable for it.
Ladies, I just wanted to jump in. This was a question a while ago regarding it, similar to what you were talking about. So that question of excused absences. So let's say Joey or Susie has a reasonable excuse, but how do you have that conversation, and how do you set those expectations in advance of that? So let's say we're switching as we come back into our facilities. How would you guide people to set those expectations and then have those obligation conversations?
Yeah, in our course, we give an example of moving from rules and regulations to standards and expectations, and how to communicate your standards and expectations. And that would be a good example of one of those things. In-service is mandatory, and communicating that on your onboarding in the front end. And granted, you have to realize people are going to miss. Like, that's the reality of life. We just want to minimize that as much as possible. And then communicating them what the process is. They should know if they miss in-service, they should be coming up to you before the next shift to be skill checked or audited. And that would be documented. Like, there should be accountability on their part too, but they should be aware of that process and then being scheduled for the makeup, time frame.
Yeah, I always had people make sure to tell me, obviously things happen and we can't predict everything, but most of the time they do know there's going to be a conflict in advance. So as long as they told me in advance, I would, work more with them on how to do that and how to make up hours. And a lot of times I even did the makeups before they missed it. So because they had enough advanced warning and told me in advance that we had set something up that they could make up the in-service hours prior to them missing that in-service.
And then related to that, how would you answer the question that sometimes comes up from upper management to the aquatics manager or director about the workload burden this creates of having, let's say, multiple in-service sessions to accommodate a larger staff or to provide flexibility? how do you create that environment with dry management that they understand why it's our burden to do that?
Well, I think it's showing them what kind of, we walk through the perspective. Like, I didn't even realize as an operator how critical in-service is looked at. I would have probably operated a little bit differently, documented a little bit differently, done things a little bit differently. But when we know better, we do better. So I think it's being able to communicate what the risks are on the other side. Like, I know this is a burden, but this is long-term. If something happens, they don't really go back to their initial lifeguard training. They're going to in-service. And that was the closest training that they received to the event. And that's what they're going to try to poke holes in our operation. And the way that we, mitigate that as much as possible is by doing X, Y, Z. And this is kind of our plan.
Well, and I worked for a numbers guy, right? He didn't come from aquatics. He was an all numbers guy. So what I did was put together a presentation for him about, how much incidents would cost us, our insurance, what our premiums were, et cetera, co-pays, all of that, and money-wise, right? And then how much spending on in-service would cost and the extra stuff and whatever and all the numbers. And it was actually cheaper for the company if we could mitigate a lot of the other stuff that happened and really focused on training and preventative stuff, that we would actually save the company a lot of money. And then he was totally in. So it's more of, you've got to meet them where they're at. So from the standpoint of, you can only reach someone from their perspective. They are not aquatics people, and it is what it is. So you're going to have to figure out how to meet them at their perspective and communicate in their language to show them the importance of all of this.
Another question I had come up in the chat a while ago, I want to ask. So there was a question about facility trends and likelihood. So Ben was talking about identifying, do we focus our training a little bit more on what is actually likely to happen in our facility in terms of injuries, or do you keep it broad? What do you ladies feel?
I think there's a balance there. I think if you know a certain type of injury happens repeatedly at your facility and you aren't training on it, that's an exposure, because you could be asked, that event happens again, and they would say, Josh or Jacob or whoever asked the question, I forget, you knew this was an injury, right? You knew this was a pattern that happened. What did you do to mitigate that risk or to prepare your guards to respond to it? So I think being aware of, first aid trends and being able to evaluate that and what your, is likely in your facility. And like Ashley said, we don't want to not do, spinals just because we've never had a spinal, but we don't want to do them every in-service if it's not something that your facility faces regularly, so just being aware of that.
There was another question. Can you ladies talk a little bit more about the crisis connection on Thursdays, what you guys are doing and how it's a different offering from other things that are happening right now in the aquatics industry in terms of calls or webinars?
Yeah, Ash, you want to talk?
Yeah, so we kind of start with wellness perspective check-in, and we all know that as humans, that this is a different time for us, and how are we handling this mentally and emotionally, and then kind of diving into the operational piece and being an operator in aquatics and different ideas. It's more of providing strategies and solutions and support through this time, and getting other aquatics members involved, from water parks to YMCAs to pool management companies, to try to work together to provide these solutions of kind of what's coming up. And it seems like every week there's a new thing that's coming up based upon what's going on in the world. But I don't know what else you have to add to that, Natalie.
Yeah, I mean, like tomorrow, our training topics tomorrow, we're doing perspective. We're talking about how to make decisions and create momentum, even when you're overwhelmed, even when there's a lot of stuff going on. We're going to talk about asset mapping. We're going to be talking about critical things you should be evaluating right now from a touch point perspective, and what systems you need to put in place now for when we are reopening that will benefit you. So kind of those action plans, that's kind of what tomorrow is going to be.
Can you also talk about, I love your piece about the standard of care in your area. And I think a lot of facilities are ignorant of saying, well, we don't care what the YMCA down the road is doing. We don't care what the university pool is doing. Can you talk about, from a legal perspective, like how that standard of care is judged on regional facilities and how we could maybe connect with people and kind of see what they're doing and how it impacts what we should or should not be doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's an easy connect. I mean, Katie's given, that resource would be a great thing to ask here. The director, yes, she just posted it. But I think that's important. As I said, there's two different angles for kind of establishing industry standard of care. First would be local or state codes, regional codes, any codes that are written, then would be your specific lifeguard agency. So even if you're like a Red Cross agency and a different lifeguard agency, that's still considered. And then what like or similar operations next to you. So if we're evaluating a country club, that's evaluated much differently than a water park is. It's kind of looked at differently, but those are kind of the three tiers that are typically used.
Okay, another question we had come up is where do you ladies fall on so if we say 4 hours a month, can that be 8 hours bi-monthly? Can that be 12 hours a semester? How do you break it down in terms of, like you said, service delivery? How do we fit it in around our regular service delivery? And can it be done more or less frequently than monthly, or what do you think?
Well, sorry. It's again, back to the macro. If you were to have an event tomorrow, would you be cool with how you planned everything up to that point? So sometimes, if you're saying, well, I hadn't had an in-service in 6 weeks, right? That's a little bit different than saying, well, you have one every week, right? So just, if you're cool with that, then cool. But just keep in mind, usually this is per month is how it's outlined in the verbiage in textbooks and in state codes. So making sure that we meet those requirements is where you should start, but also thinking about it in the macro and the questions that we started with in the beginning. If you can honestly answer those and be cool with it, then good for you, right? I don't know.
And think about what the other side of the argument is going to be. They're always going to say if it was closer to the event, it would be more impactful, right? That we farther away, we have, more of a chance of losing some of that. So, if you're angling for the safe side, and you're still doing the same amount of hours to spread it out closer, I would consider that. But, that, like we said, that's something you're going to have to weigh. And, reading into the language, like the Model Aquatic Health Code, I don't have it in front of me, but it says like regular and deliberate or whatever the in-service module is. So they're going to have to look for the definition of what that means. What is regular in-service practice, defined? And I don't know. It's just like you're getting into a semantics with words and all that kind of stuff. So I always prefer as an operator to, stay on that above phrase so we don't have to get into those kind of arguments. But that's a judgment call with what works for your individual operation.
Another question that was coming in is who can run in service? Can it be somebody below the supervisory level? What is that responsibility? Kind of tracking back a little bit to your question about running a station and training up leadership. But who do you think can run it and still be accountable for the organization and for that legal piece?
Yeah, well, I would check with your, lifeguard agency if they have specific requirements for if it needs to be an instructor or if a non-instructor can run them. And that was also some of the reason for why we created that in-service leader certification training course, because so many operators were, asked in deposition, well, what qualifies you to run an in-service? And they were like, I'm a lifeguard, or I'm just an instructor. And it doesn't sound good. It's not a good justification that they've had specific training on, the codes and the requirements and what it means to be an effective in-service. So we wanted to give operators that tool to be able to say, look, I'm certified. I went through this specific training on this specific topic. And, that's why I'm able to run the in-service. So it's we met that need in the industry with that course.
Another question is, sorry, go ahead. Oh, is there more to add?
No, she was just clearing her throat.
Sorry. Full disclosure, Natalie's not 100% today, so the fact that she's still presenting is amazing. So typical aquatics person, just pulling it out when it matters. Yep. Another question we had a while ago was the documentation. So can you give us an idea of what you would do for documentation for an in-service? So it's an attendance list, it's a lesson plan. What does that look like for the actual documentation of what we've done or what we plan to do?
Yeah, specific signatures. So if I print their name or they do, and signing off themselves, so their signature is on it. It's not me just checking something off. And then full lesson plans. When we do lesson plans in kind of 5-minute blocks, and we give examples of that, but as specific as possible, because if 2 years from now, if I did an EAP scenario, like, what does that mean? right? Was it with equipment? Was it without equipment? Was it deep end? Was it shallow end? Like, how was I doing all that? So as much detail as you can provide there. And of course, the generals, the date, the time, the where it was at, the length, the instructors, like as much specifics as you can get on what actually happened, because that's going to be the tool that you're used to refresh your memory of what happened. So, I mean, you can look, take out, 2 years ago in July, pull out July 2018's in-service and read through it and be like, do I really remember what happened? If not, what would help me writing down so I could communicate very clearly, what we did and why we did it and who was here, evaluate starting there.
What do you think about the cloud? Somebody's asking, can we store this in the cloud? Does it have to be paper?
Depends on your code requirements. So look at your state code requirements. Some of them, like I'm in California, requires a paper document, or it has to be on site, which means we couldn't store it in a cloud, but it could be on a computer. So there's weird code requirements about that. So just look into your codes and make sure that you follow that accordingly. You could print it in paper and then scan it in and save it as long as your code allows for that.
One of the other questions that came up a little while ago is, what about the actual enforcement or the teeth? How would you deal with actually pulling someone from the deck who didn't miss in service or doesn't have their quals if they're expired, in light of the staffing shortages that many facilities were facing prior to COVID?
Well, that's why I think creating a makeup in-service plan and communicating that up front is extremely important, and making it something where it's not just you can't work because you missed in-service, because that would be detrimental. Right. It is, you come to where you missed in service. I'm going to skill check you really quick. That'll take me 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to sign off. I'm going to put you back on stand, but I'm at least protecting myself and you, that we are, at least if something happens, I know your skill level was up to par and I put you back on stand.
What about in that related question, if somebody able during service to perform core physical fitness items or skills, where do you ladies fall on that in terms of remediation or work plans or shifts?
They probably need to not specifically lifeguard if they can't perform the functions. If they have like a broken foot, I'm not going to put them on stand anyway, so they can participate to the level of that they're able to, but then their job function, if I'm in a water park world, they may just be dispatching or they may be doing something. We would always make sure that if they were identifiable as a lifeguard, that they were able to at least perform CPR as the minimum standard. Even if they were in a dispatching role, if they had that, cross on them and were identifiable as, hey, I'm a rescuer, they needed to be able to at least do all of those skills, even if they weren't entering the water for some reason or whatnot. So consider that.
Another question a while ago is, can you speak to any areas that generally you routinely see as weak, either through these incidents or just general audits of facilities?
Oh, I think it's content, right? Some of it is, document. I mean, all the stuff we really covered, to be honest with you, is kind of what has come up. So really documentation is a big one. Also, what you're actually doing in service and time on task, right? So if you followed one of your lifeguards around and had a stopwatch and started it as soon as they did hands-on practice with something, how much in that hour or 2 hours or however long your in-service is, are they actually physically doing something to sharpen their skills? And that was super eye-opening. So some of that is just really kind of what we really talked about. These 11 things are the consistent stuff that's really come up. I don't know if you have something to add to that, Natalie.
No, I think the time on task, we didn't hit on that, but that's a good one to add as a resource for people, is to, like you said, time somebody. And, we'd find that in like a 2-hour in-service, they were spending like 7 to 9 minutes actually one person doing something. Well, that's where we need to focus on. We need to either, spread out activities or create stations or create more hands-on practice. So we're increasing in that time frame that they're actually doing more hands-on tasks. That was a good starting point.
Is there any specific actual skills that you see as deficient routinely, like poor communication or poor response times or poor CPR skills? Anything specific that way?
Yeah.
CPR management. Natalie, you can attest to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, CPR, actual compressions and where they're being done, everything with compressions, and airway management for sure. Yeah,
and I did post for those of you So make sure you're following us tribe on Facebook. They post really the best resources in the industry in terms of ideas and activities, 100% free. So make sure you're following Aquatics Tribe on Facebook. I did share on the Lakeview Aquatic Consultant page this morning and last night some of our favorite most recent topics. And the one I love that you guys shared was the do-it-yourself female mannequin. So putting a sports bra and some fake boobs on a mannequin to really get those boys, men, teenagers, whomever to be touching the lady, right? Like, because, or even practicing cutting off.
Even females, we saw it across the board. Like, they're just afraid to touch females in the chest. And that's what the studies have shown, is that women don't get the same care provided, you know, whether it be a cardiac event or whatnot. And I think that's a gap we can easily close.
Are the other questions? There was a question about how long to keep records for in-service training, or I guess certifications in general.
Typically it's 7 years, but again, check your code and what your lifeguard agency recommends, but typically 7 years.
Yeah, and be consistent within your company too, because a lot of times we see that, you know, one department goes off of their own kind of timeline and the other side of the company doesn't. So you want to also be consistent as a company as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
What do you ladies feel about long-term in-service planning? And so you set your, let's say, your schedule for the year, and you identify topics monthly that you want to touch on, but then changing up your topics as you see need in the workplace. Where do you ladies fall on that? Like, do you stick to the schedule? Do you change it up? How do you make sure you cover everything?
You know, I try to do both. Like, I'm a planner. So I always plan things out in advance, and I just think better that way. But I always leave room for I'm sorry, there's a lot of echo there. Opportunity to change, you know, last minute. I can switch an activity out, or, you know, move July's to June, or vice versa.
Okay. Do we have, if you have any other questions, please post them in the chat box. We're nearing the end of this session, so I'll give you guys a minute or two. If there's other questions, please do post them in the chat box. Natalie and Ashley are able to answer them, but they're not disappearing, right? They're very active on Facebook. They're very active on Instagram. If you're interested in their course, have a look at their course. The Crisis Connection is tomorrow, so join me on that. I know I'm going to be watching it. And I found it very valuable last year, a valuable, different perspective. And I know for me, you know, knowing that Ashley is a licensed counselor really brings, I think, a lot of gravitas to a lot of courses that you see on the internet these days. They're not science or education based. So I know what we're getting from them is very much experience and education driven. Last chance for questions, so you can connect with them online. I'll make a couple of short announcements just to see if we get any other questions. So a couple of announcements. So on Friday, we will have Wayne here, Wayne Ivasich from Taylor Technologies. He's going to be talking about water testing specific to lifeguards. So I would encourage you, even if you're not a pool operator, pool operations is a huge part of your product, your service, your pools. So join us for that 60 minutes. Monday, Adrian Spencer is going to be here from near Halifax, Nova Scotia, talking about accessibility. And this is not about buying a lift or adding a ramp or adding rails. This is about how you can train your staff to provide dignity to the users of your facility and the clients that you are missing for revenue and programming that you don't even realize. Okay, so that's going to be Adrian on Monday. And then next Wednesday, we have Paul Macias. I'll put all these links in the chat box in a second. Regarding advertising aquatics on Instagram. So Farmers Branch Aquatic Center in Texas, he will be joining us. Jessica also posted a little while ago. I'll get her to repost the link for Texas Recreation and Parks Society for CEUs. If you have a state that is looking to provide CEUs, please email me and we'll make sure we get everything set up for CEUs. So far, we have Illinois. I know Iowa's looking into it. The AOP, Association of Aquatic Professionals, TRAPS, a few other states. So I'll let Ashley and Natalie, if you want to address any of the final questions we've got in the chat box, and I'll pop some links in for everyone.
Yeah, I see one there from Angela. How do you motivate your staff to come to in-service? Do you give incentives or just mandatory, no ifs, ands, or buts? It is mandatory, but we make it fun. Like, it's a fun place they want to be. And it's challenging, right? Guards like that challenge, and there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, you can do a bead program, you can do a level up program of, they get a different ribbon, like a kind of like a karate belt or something, when they meet certain objectives, if you are having trouble kind of shifting that culture. But I think first it's moving from like rules and regulations to standards and expectations, clarifying what those are. And then making sure it's engaging and fun. I mean, if it's like boring and you're treating it that way, like they're going to feel that too. So make it a place they want to be. Let's see if there's anything else.
I saw somebody asked about the Crisis Connection. So it's the link's down there at the bottom. It says free Crisis Connection weekly trainings. That's the link for the session tomorrow.
It's also on our Facebook page. If you scroll through and search for Crisis Connection, you'll see the link on Facebook if you want to direct click there. Well, thank you everybody for your time. I'm seeing all the thanks, so thank you back.
Yeah, thank you guys.
And you can feel free to reach out to us, on our website, or you can email us if you have any questions or if you're planning and something comes up. We're happy to help.
Yep. So I want to say thank you to Natalie and Ashley. I have to grab some of those links. I didn't have them as prepared as I thought. So all of the links for all of the events are available on the Lakeview Aquatic Consultant page. There is a main page, so I'm going to put that in now, and I will also put the individual click meeting events. So same as you've done for any event, you can pre-register. If you don't pre-register, it's not the end of the world. Fingers crossed, I keep recording all of these sessions just fine. So thank you everybody who joined us. We had almost 300 people today, so thank you for your time. Thank you to Natalie and Ashley from Alive Solutions Incorporated, better known as Aquatics Tribe. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We are here. We are not alone in this crisis. I know certainly in Canada, our governments are starting to say, June, July, what does that look like? So don't lose hope. Take some time. Don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel this week, especially with something like inservice. Look at the inservice leader they've developed. Look at their free Facebook resources. Put that together in an achievable, smart way. Don't create this mountain of work that is going to overwhelm you and then you never do it. Okay. So webinar recording for this session will be up tomorrow. I'm still working on these edits for Monday, just with the video. So your patience is appreciated. I have put in the chat notes. I'm going to pin it now. The show notes for today will all be at the link. Sorry, you guys are very chatty today. So lots of, it's moving quickly. 1 second. I'll pin today's show notes. And then if there's no further questions, thank you and have a great rest of your day. And we'll see you on Friday if you join us on Friday.
Thanks, Katie. You're awesome again.
Thank you. Stay well, guys.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.